Go, Daniel.
I welcome you for our third webinar for this year. Is carbon-free travel possible for Gozo, the contribution of the business sector? This webinar has the objective of getting the ball rolling on the issue of green mobility on the island of Gozo. During the past year, we had a number of discussions with Dr. Janet Axisa from the Foundation for Transport on how best to promote green mobility in Gozo, mainly the best way of offsetting the carbon footprint generated by the transport sector on the island. We have also seen, however, what are the conditions so that we can concretely achieve these objectives, and what are the issues that need to be addressed. To this end, I want to thank her for her close collaboration and assistance so that these goals can be achieved. Today, we are going to see both concrete examples from the commercial sector and also the assistance available so that the commercial sector can make the shift. We have an important array of speakers and panelists today. To this end, special thanks goes to Janet Axisa, Mark Cicluna Bartoli from Bank of Valletta, Daniela Burlo from Waterhouse Coopers, Roman Deutschuk from the European Investment Bank, and Patrick Spiteri-Staines as well, together with Michelle Ganado, who all helped and collaborated during this, for this session. I would like to thank them in advance for their contribution and also for the assistance provided in setting up this webinar. All of those who are participating on our online platform, please feel free to post your comments and questions, which will be answered by our panelists during the dedicated question and answer session. To this end, we hope that you will find this webinar useful, and I'll now kindly invite Michael Bugeja, Vice President of the Gozo Business Chamber, to make his introductory remarks.
Thank you, Daniel, for your introduction. I welcome all those who have joined us through our online platform and also those who are following us through our social media platforms. As a chamber and also as the host structure of Europe Direct office in Gozo, we constantly advocate for and support the implementation of policies relating to green mobility, especially in Gozo. We believe in Gozo's potential of becoming a catalyst among both islands, and this webinar today has the objective of getting the ball rolling on this subject. Gozo is fully dependent on proper accessibility, which can be seen also from sea passenger numbers and ferry trips made throughout the year. Therefore, undoubtedly, transport is an undeniably essential factor for Gozo's economic and social survival. The trips between the islands reached a total of 38,453 in 2021 also. In parallel, one can also observe the exponential increase in private vehicle ownership, which has gone up to 1,365 cars per 1,000 inhabitants over 18 years. This marks more than 100% of the total population who can actually drive. This is extremely concerning for us, emphasizing the need for offsetting the carbon footprint within the transport sector, with the aim of keeping in line with the EU's goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050 and reducing greenhouse gases by at least 55% by 2030. The Chamber's position is based on Gozo achieving carbon neutrality, enabling it to achieve the same even before Malta does. We truly believe this can be done if many efforts and a lot of planning go into creating the required policy and regulatory framework. Apart from creating the necessary policy and regulatory framework, where specific and more focused incentives need to be created for residents on the island, there are other objectives which need to be achieved, such as enough supply on the grid to meet the increase in demand. It is a fact that electrifying road transport requires a heavier load on the grid's current demand. As the situation stands in Gozo, we already have a number of villages struggling with lack of supply of electricity in periods where demand is high, like the winter and summer months. Electric vehicles are high consumers of electricity. So even though as a chamber we agree fully with green mobility and that it is also an opportunity for Gozo to be used as a testbed, we cannot forego the concern that many Gozitans have regarding the stability of electricity provision, especially if demand is to increase even more with a push for electric vehicles. Therefore, prior to embarking on this mission at full speed, the government must also address the stability of supply of electricity for all Gozitans in all villages and towns. Today's discussion focuses on businesses, as we believe that they are the backbone of Gozo's economy and can pave the way by setting an example in achieving the island's sustainability goals. To this end, I would like to thank the speakers who will be joining us today, including Dr. Janet Axisa, Mark Shikluna Bartoli, Roman Dojak, Daniela Burlo, and Patrick Spiter-Stings, who will deliver their presentation on behalf of their respective entities.
Thank you, Michael. I now invite Dr. Janet Axisa to deliver her presentation.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I will now try to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
yes,
okay. So thank you once again and for this opportunity to address. And today I would like to take the business owner's perspective. I would like to take the business owner perspective towards green transport. So my objective in this presentation is to how we, as a business owner, can we understand a bit more about the green technologies, about becoming carbon free? What does it mean for my company? Do we need to go for it? Do we want to go for it? And what steps are necessary to implement? So where do we start? So I would like to introduce first and foremost the Foundation for Transport. The Foundation for Transport is a very young reality. It's only its second year of operation, and we have 5 co-founders: the Malta Employers Association and Chamber of SMEs, the Transport Regulator, MCAST, and Malta Enterprise. As you can see, step 1 for us was to provide a holistic base, having vocational education, the transport regulation, incentives and schemes, and the industry association. As our main theme was, we want to bring about change and explain change from the industry perspective. So the first step was to have these co-founders, but the second step was to link transport to climate change, to carbon emissions, to energy, to environment, and all a holistic approach that obviously various stakeholders, such as the Gozo Business Chamber, can give us and can obviously provide a holistic feedback to various policies. As you can see here, we have various collaborations with various ministries, various government entities as well, including the GRDA, and most of all, the business community, which we regularly meet through the industry associations. We also, so the third step, we didn't want to have the approach of basing all our input on a personal opinion or a personal experience. So we regularly meet through the industry associations, all partners, all business owners, because we want to strive a balance between the technologies we are trying to take, the incentives that are readily available and perhaps new ones, and the skills. Because we can have the best technologies, the best business models, but if we don't have the right people at the right place, transport will definitely be out of business and will definitely not have the opportunity to become carbon free. So as a mission, we can say we have strived to achieve sustainable transport, but in simple terms, when we meet business owners, we want to convey this message. We are working together with them so that they understand better how to adopt these new green technologies. And I would like to give a context to what I will be saying this. We are fully aware that there is great economic turmoil. So the context within which we are trying to recover from COVID, we are trying to recover from supply chains difficulties due to COVID and due to war, Brexit challenges, and also loss of markets, perhaps to some unrest in the North African countries. So having a smooth sail is obviously not on the table. So one would ask, but from where can we start? From where do we start? First and foremost, we need to understand what's going on in technology. Technology is racing. So if you obviously can Google, you can easily find that as we speak right now, the carriers, the cruise liners and large cargo vessels are being built using a hybrid of wind energy, of green methanol and blue ammonia. Island states like Malta and Gozo are piloting piloting drones using hydrogen for courier services. In aviation, the large carriers are using hydrogen, so we no longer have carbon fossil fuel aeroplanes. For the training centers, the small aircraft are using electrification. In road transport, the Euro 6 and Euro 7 engines may still be in the league. Whilst electrification is catching up, obviously for the large commercial vehicles, hydrogen seems to be tested, and in the coming few years, it will be around us too. So what we're saying is that in 5 to 10 years, our yacht marinas will have super yachts having hybrid power, using sails, using wind energy, but using also solar energy. Our ports and seaports, our airports and seaports will have different aeroplanes from hydrogen, cargo ships powered by hydrogen, cruise ships powered by hydrogen. Are we prepared for all this? Is our infrastructure there? Also, if we want to change our vehicles, now I'm taking the business perspective, not the personal perspective of buying one's own car. Will my fleet of commercial vehicles go for Euro 7? Or shall we wait for hydrogen? So all these ramifications in the short, medium, and long term, where does that leave us? So we have a very much unrest economic condition. We have the technology that is racing. Where does it lead? First and foremost, we believe as foundation that the business owner has to understand whether he or she would like to go for the change. Can you exist without going to change? Can you still be in business in the coming few years if you don't want to change? If the answer is no, then obviously you need to start some soul searching and identify the gaps. And we say when we identify the gaps, we have to look at the financing gaps, at gaps in skills, in partners. Perhaps you need to go into new corporate alliances, or perhaps you need to understand a bit more about new markets. And above all, do you consider whether you want to pilot for solutions and benefits on a small scale? I can name one particular pilot project we have at the moment as foundation, because obviously from a business owner's perspective, all this talk about Fit for 55 and carbon free, it has to be translated into pounds, shilling, and pence. And we have a pilot project called Electric. And this electric pilot project measures the impact of using an electric van, a mid-range van, in deliveries. You all know that we have quite a few electric cars in passenger cars. but very few are used in the logistics and in the delivery. So if you happen to see in Gozo, this van or similar vans or in Malta, that's us. We're testing electrification in deliveries. So here we have partnered with Farsons and Michael Bugeja, and they have made available a mid-range van for Farsons to use in deliveries. What are we doing here? Together in agreement with Farsons, we said, okay, let's discuss what we shall measure. Are we measuring the payload? So will the van perform the same way as a diesel van in the case of a load? Are we able to do the same journeys? Are we doing this, able to do the same stoppages? Do we need to have some training with the drivers? Because having a driver for 20 years driving a diesel van instead of an electric van may need some familiarization. From a safety point of view, if an accident happens, what shall we do? And from a cost and benefit point of view, what are the benefits? Do we need a one-for-one investment? For example, if the payload satisfies the whole working plan, the whole logistic plan, and we have a fleet of 12, does that mean that we need 12 new electric vans to replace 12 diesel vans, or we need less, or we need more? So all these ramifications will need to take place. And this is exactly why we're doing these pilot projects, because we don't want to produce data and speak about personal experience or a personal opinion, but based on facts. So how does it work? Participation is voluntary. So we approach business owners through industry associations, which are either co-founders, or the one we work with, like for example, Gozo Business Chamber. So the participation is voluntary. It's up to the business owner to accept. During the discussions, we discuss and outline and agree on the number of days or weeks for this duration, because the ultimate aim of the pilot project is to test with a limited duration, but also test on a micro scale. So if something happens, if we fail on a micro scale. We don't fail with a big bang approach. We also agree and discuss the key performance indicators depending on the business. For example, a micro organization doing a lot of errands will have one set of KPIs, but perhaps a bigger company which has a lot of deliveries will have for sure the reliability of the journeys, the logistics pattern, the familiarity of the drivers. So a lot of things come into place. We also agree on the data collection, whether it's on a day-to-day, on a weekly basis, and who will do what. And as I said before, the confidence of the staff, the knowledge, and whether, and you can appreciate that in transport, some people have, some business owners have their own mechanics and have their own garages. So the skills element plays a very important part, whether the mechanic has to reskill and whether the tools and machinery in their garages will need to change as well. And obviously, as we said, safety and the total costs and benefits of the entire thing. So why is this being done? You may be asking yourself, but why such a tiny reality is going for something like this? First and foremost, as we said, we would like to have new technologies, to give access to new technologies to all business owners. So we're not talking about the medium and the big and the large companies here. We also want to have the micro and the small. So secondly, one, access. Secondly, we are after facts. You can also say, but we have the plan and the literature of the electric cars and electric vehicles. But yes, that's not enough. We would like people to understand before going into investments and going into change, to read well the impact and to understand well the impact. We are not transferring skill of innovation. The risk that it's all at the foundation. So if something fails, since it is on a small scale, it can stay with the foundation and the business can go back to its own operations. But the most important thing, as this innovation into green technologies is made available to everyone, and it's allowed to test and go wrong for a short time and in a small scale. So we're not asking someone to go and invest and go for loans and working capital and schemes and do all the work, and then finally finds out, or she finds out, that it does not work well and we're even making losses. We're saying we're trying to test so that if someone goes wrong, we'll stop, and that's it. And we don't have business owners, we don't have enterprises tied up to something that it's not working for a long time. So people can go out of it as soon as it does not materialize well. So at the end of the pilot project, the company will have information on the payload of the new technology, has information of what working, what planning is needed, has information on the investment required, whether it's a one-for-one, as I have explained earlier, the need for training and retraining, the incentives and the schemes that will be most beneficial. And as I said, the overall costs and benefits. And from the foundation point of view, we will be matching these data so that when we talk to policymakers, we not only give a holistic approach, but we match with the regulations and laws already in place. We match with the incentives and schemes already in place. And if need be, we can explain what new accelerators we need, what new schemes we need, what new, let's say, opportunities need for the acceleration of the adoption of this green technology. But from the business owner's point of view, from the company's point of view, this pilot projects or similar pilot projects give some light, shed some light on also carbon footprint measurement, the reporting on ESG, how to become sustainable in real terms, which specific incentives apply, which schemes are most beneficial for you, and the quality of infrastructure. And here I'm not only referring to the charging pillar infrastructure, I am also referring, if most transport companies obviously work in airports and seaports, and we will be having in seaports in 5 years and 10 years down the line, different powered vessels and aircrafts, does that impact my operations? Does that impact my company? So here we're trying to obviously strive a balance as well. Needless to say, the transport sector is made up of a lot of micro and small enterprises, and the emphasis on skills is important because most of players and employees are industry taught, are self-taught. So we don't want to have innovation and the acceleration to green technologies to create barriers, but to have a level playing field. And the level playing field means that we need equal opportunity and equal access to resources. Resources, not just funding, but resources, availability of training. And so we would like to push forward and we'd like to emphasize that training needs and reskilling and upskilling need to be defined in the widest sense possible. So if we are after insight training, if we are after training on simulators, we are after even various levels, including foundation and introductory services. If these training need to be on a modular or outside office hours, because we have found out, and this was typical not only in Gozo, but also in Malta, that micro enterprises in transport will need to close their business to go for the training. So not to create barriers and to have a level playing field, we think that the skills and the reskilling aspect needs to be interpreted on the widest sense possible. Success to innovation and success to getting a carbon-free footprint has 3 major pillars according to the foundation. So first and foremost, bespoke incentives for industry. So when a government regulator or a government agency or the government itself or banks or whatever, they need to have the bespoke to industry. It's not a one size fits all. So if you want to help students, that's one thing. If you want to help private citizens, that's another. But industry has to be specific to their needs. It has to match their needs so that you have working capital and you give availability of funds on a longer term. So that if someone has a fleet, say, of 100 cars, not only they can change or convey one car or two, but they can have a long-term plan that will, in 2-3 years down the line, change the entire fleet. And obvious, we need also various concepts of public, semi-public, and private infrastructure. And yes, once again, I am not only referring to the electric charging infrastructure needed for road transport. I am here also referring to infrastructure in airports and seaports and any approaches near to them. So in a nutshell, in my presentation, I am trying to strike a balance based on facts, but keeping in mind that we have technologies that are driving fast change. Incentives are there, but perhaps we need to check the match, the reskilling that we have to make sure it's not a barrier, and the infrastructure that will need to balance so that our business is not just sustainable from a financial point of view and from a skills point of view, but also in its application of the skills and the technologies. The pilot project, which I have already mentioned, can be replicated to various technologies. I mean, I've mentioned electrification, but we can do, and we are planning pilot projects on solar, on renewables, other renewables like wind energy. So the application is very, very wide. It can be applied on other modes of transport. We spoke about road transport, but it's equally important that we have maritime and aviation considered in the carbon-free footprint and the transition towards a carbon-free footprint. Obviously, I cannot just reiterate, the skills and training, the opportunities have to be wide because it's a dynamic thing. Technology is dynamic, and we have to keep abreast of this situation. As foundation, we are planning other pilot projects, but as you appreciate, we are keen, whilst we are keen to feed the policymakers with data based on facts, and we would like to see that the regulations in place are effective and act as enablers, because as you can appreciate, the foundation, the structure enables that change, puts the industry, puts the business owner as part of the change in regulations and in laws from the very, very start. And that is one of our main missions. But obviously funding is key because nothing comes for free. There is a lot of time in planning and in approaching and in explaining. And obviously we need to pay for a lot of the resources made available. But we have applied for various EU-funded projects, and hopefully we will be able to explain a bit more about the data sourced from these pilot projects in the coming future. So in a nutshell, to recap, what are the take-home values of this presentation? First and foremost, where do we start from? We start from identifying whether we would like to go for change and the impact on our businesses. Let's go for and let's have industry-specific incentives. Let the schemes be applied in a more wide-ranging to include, for example, the greening of yacht marinas, water sports operators, the use of aircraft, special aircraft for training. We are after a mix of technologies. So we know that a lot of the recovery plan for Malta is investing a lot in electrification. That's good, that's great. But all countries in the world are after a mix of technologies. And what is happening and what I have outlined in the technology developments earlier on produce a mix of technologies. So it is not a one size fits all. And for sure, the business will not go for a one size fits all because everyone has its own prevailing circumstances. And the last but not least, definitely the level playing field when it comes to reskilling. I believe that Gozo can be utilized as a prototype for such small-scale introduction of carbon-free initiatives, and I wish you well for the rest of the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janet, for your very insightful presentation. The Foundation for Transport is playing a very important part, as shown by Janet, in being a catalyst of change in this whole scenario. I can vouch for that over the many discussions we had over the past year and the willingness to discuss with all so as to bring Gozo's needs to the fore. The challenges mentioned by Janet are varied. There is the challenge of skilling. There is the challenge also that Michael mentioned of the infrastructure that has to be in place, and also the ability to be able to withstand the needs of the electrification of the commercial fleet. And then, but this is an important change that we need to make. Yesterday, we had the statistics of the National Statistics Office that came into part. There is about 1.something% of the electrification of vehicles, and that amount needs to rise in order for us to be able to reach the objectives which are being set by the European Commission. The challenges are varied, but everyone is working towards that objective. So thank you very much, Janet. I would now like to invite Mark Shikluna Bartoli, Roman Dojcik, Daniela Burlo, and also Patrick Spiteri-Stains to deliver their presentation. I give the floor to you, Mark.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Michael, for the invite and hosting us. I found Janet's presentation really insightful, and thank you, Janet, for the presentation. We would agree with you on incentives. There needs to be a better form of synergy of the incentives, and potentially our presentation will show how there is a bit of a lack of synergy between incentives. And a lingering point I had in your presentation, Janet, was whether mobility will start moving into the service space, where mobility starts to become more of a service than an investment businesses need to make. When you see global mobile platforms looking at Malta to invest in, as one can see in the news items today, I think the future, and actually I hope your pilot project can give some insights onto what is your minimum fleet size to actually invest, because you might want to consider mobility as a service unless your fleet size is of a certain size. So thank you, it was really insightful. I kept asking myself lots of questions while you were presenting. Now, coming to our presentation, I'll be sharing my screen now. I understand it's visible now. We're focusing on the financing side of green mobility. From a Bank of Valletta perspective, financing mobility is a piece of a much bigger picture for us, to be honest, as a bank, because at the moment we are currently discussing how the bank wants to position itself from an ESG perspective. And financing mobility is a piece of that. The way we're looking into it as well from an ESG perspective is how to position products and incentives to assist the business community move towards a greener and a more environmentally friendly activity. The products, and the products is one of the key points, and this is one of the points we'll be presenting in our presentation today. Where we are currently piloting an innovative initiative together with European Investment Fund and European Investment Bank. It's a pilot at a European Union level to see whether it can be scaled up. And it's a pilot because there are three features to this product, if you may say. One is the standard guarantee products, which we have seen in the market over the past 3 years, where it provides banks a guarantee cover, allowing them to reduce their collateral requests and also the interest rate on the loan. However, over the past 2 to 3 years, financial instruments have also been blending in an element of grant into them. And the way they're doing this is by complementing a guarantee facility with an interest rate subsidy. And so that is the second feature of the product. The third innovation, which is new to this product and hasn't never really been tested in the market, is the provision of technical advice to businesses to create a project pipeline that may be used then to finance via the loan and the interest rate subsidy. We had already given a short presentation on the product last year. So today's presentation is going to focus more on the technical assistance. The technical assistance is being championed by the European Investment Bank Group and has sought the expertise of Waterhouse Coopers from a national level to be able to deliver this kind of assistance. So as I said, I'll give a very short insight into the scheme and small updates we're currently implementing. And then I'll give the floor to the EIB and PwC to take us through what assistance they can provide to business and also potential case studies. So these are the benefits of the scheme as it currently is out in the market at the moment. A few weeks ago, the European Investment Fund is looking into trying to increase the incentive element of this product by increasing the interest rate subsidy from 2% to 2.5%. And obviously, the interest rate subsidy will be for a longer term. Instead of over 3 years, it will be over 10 years, which would be nearly over the full life of the loan. That would nearly make the loan interest-free. And also, the increased incentive of the interest rate subsidy may reduce a little bit the maximum loan amount. So it might reduce a little bit from 750,000. But otherwise, the scheme parameters remain generally the same, but with an additional incentive added to it. Another dimension that has been included is we have widened the scope of the scheme, where previously it was focused on private enterprises and SMEs and mid-caps. The scheme now is also open to large enterprises, and which is also quite a novelty to regulated entities and also NGOs. So that has opened the scope potentially to other entities who may want to consider to benefit from the scheme. As eligible costs, a lot of them have remained the same as originally presented. It entails interior, exterior apertures, lighting, renewable energy solutions. But obviously for this time, considering the focus of the presentation is on transport, obviously the focus would be mainly on the purchase of electric vehicles and potentially charging stations as one way of moving towards a greener business model. And these are some of the eligible measures that one may consider for financing under the scheme. So you would have the charging stations, you'd have the purchase of electric vehicles, both electric and even hybrid may be considered. And even if you are a company, for example, in the logistics space, you could also do investments in your offices or workshop and garages. So these are some ideas. We're presenting them to you here because the case study would be using some of these eligible costs to show how one may want to consider financing himself going forward. So I hope there I gave you a little snapshot into the product. Obviously, all the information is available on the BOV webpage. So if you want more details, you can access it via there. So from a product point of view, I'll stop here. What I'd like to focus on today, as I said, is the technical assistance and how the EIB and PwC advisory team could help a business going forward to try and structure its product. So on this, I give the floor to Raman to kick off and set the scene. Raman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the organizers, the Gozo Business Chamber, for having us here today to be able to present a couple of ideas that we hope very much will be of value and use the participating colleagues. My name is Roman Dojčak. I work in the EIB's Advisory Services department, and I'd like to complement Mark's previous remarks about the loan which has been developed in tandem with the European Investment Fund to enable the flow of investment finance into energy efficient and renewable energy projects, including in the mobility and transport sector. And the reason myself and the PwC Malta team colleagues are here today is because it has been considered essential that for the success of the deployment of loans in this area, it would be important that advisory and technical assistance is also provided to potential beneficiaries or potential loan recipients under this financing scheme. The European Investment Bank, mandated by the Maltese Managing Authority, and together with PwC team, have put together a comprehensive advisory package, which includes quite a number of elements. But for the purposes of today's session, I think the element which we would like to focus on is the one which is relevant for the project promoters or loan applicants, loan beneficiaries, as I phrased that in a second ago. And here I actually will just say that we are here to help, and how specifically we can help. How specifically we can help you with developing projects and making sure that they are developed in a way that they meet the criteria and the requirements of the financial support under this scheme. This will be presented to you by Daniela, Michelle, and Patrick in the next few minutes. So thank you very much for having us, and over to you, team PwC Malta.
Thank you very much, Roman. Good morning to everyone. My name is Michel Ganado. I'm the partner responsible for our consulting services here in Malta. Mark, if I can kindly ask you to move on to the next slide.
I'm trying to, but it's not reacting. Okay, there you are, Michel.
Thank you very much. So as Roman explained, the purpose of the EIB, together with the support of PwC, is to be providing advisory support to potential beneficiaries in terms of how they could be addressing their particular project initiatives. And again, the aspect of advisory support is very much divided into three main areas. There's assistance in the business case development, at the end of the day, looking at whether particular projects make sense, looking at the return of investment, and also assessing to a certain extent how investment ready these particular projects would be. There's then the second work stream, looking a bit at the loan application in terms of putting together not only the paperwork, but looking also at what aspects are eligible, and also looking how certain aspects in terms of the financial instrument could also be combined with other type of grants that are available on the market. And the third area then is looking more broadly at certain technical advice that one could be able to offer. So if I were to briefly nosedive a bit into these particular areas, if I move on to the next slide, please. So looking a bit at the business case development, obviously, there are various areas where we could be of assistance. So when you would be approaching the Bank of Valletta for certain particular projects that you might have, there might be, the need at certain points in time to be able to, refine your particular project ideas, and the level of support through the EIB would be in terms of helping you look at your investment cost and understanding the different cost components in terms of what could be eligible. Because again, remember, it would not necessarily be all the project, but particularly those aspects related to renewable energy and energy efficiency. Helping you in understanding the duration of the implementation project, arriving at, articulating and estimating energy savings, greenhouse gas emission reductions, the renewable energy capacity that would be needed. Ultimately, all this is sort of helping you identify at the end of the day what those financial savings are going to be for your respective business organizations and individual initiatives. Looking at it very much to be able to establish that return on investment and comparing it with sort of certain existing operations that you might have. The second work stream, Mark, if we can move on, is then tied into assistance on the loan application. Like I mentioned before, again, here this is very much would be geared up to help look and consider how certain grants could be, sort of coupled together with the ERE loan facility, helping you in the documentation requirements. Obviously, sort of particularly for those first-time applicants, sometimes the documentation may come across as being daunting. So, trying to simplify that process and providing guidance on sort of where there are requirements for things like energy audits or energy studies, how one could go about it. Last but not least, then there's also the type of assistance where the EIF and EIB have also invested in a Clean Water tool, and one could also be providing guidance in terms of how to use the tool and the interpretation of results. The third work stream then is related to technical advice. Maybe at this point, I'd like to hand over to Patrick Spiteri-Staines to take over from here. Patrick?
Thank you, Michelle. I'm an engineer. I'm specialized in sustainable energy, and I've formed part of the PwC team providing this advisory support. The kind of support we provide here is a bit more technically oriented, helping potential applicants identify what investments would fall under this loan application for subsidy, and where within their project, which could be a small project or a larger project, there could be areas that could be shifted onto this facility. Some of the examples we are looking at directly in the transport sector, but also ancillary to the transport sector, as most transport companies would also have offices. So refurbishment of offices where they could be putting in thermal insulation or putting in air conditioning with high efficiency, so a reduction of the energy use. These could also form part of the eligible costs. There could be also the use of waste heat from equipment used in warehouses or garages, where they could be generating heat with boilers for various use. Garages are definitely, and workshops are definitely an area where there can be energy improvement investments, and these could also be eligible to be under the facility, and also in process efficiency. In other words, in the way that they are operating their vehicles, in order to get the maximum efficiency out of their fleet and reduce the amount of energy. In the case of electrical vehicles, it would be electrical energy. In the case of internal combustion engine vehicles, it would be fuel, in order to improve their overall energy consumption. These costs, although sometimes not always obvious, are also potentially eligible under the scheme, and this is where we come in to advise on these technical matters, which costs could be eligible or not. on a case-by-case basis, we would be assisting the client depending on his particular circumstances. So it could be an investment in fleet, or it could be part of a larger upgrade. It could be an investment in equipment in workshops or garages, or just an office refurbishment. So these could all be part of the advice that we can be given to identify the particular costs which would be able to fall under this facility. Next slide, please. I think now we're going to go to the case study, and I'm going to hand over back to either Michelle or Daniela.
Hi, so I'm Daniela Burlo. I form part of the PwC consulting team. And basically following what Mark, Michelle, and Patrick have explained, I'd just like to take you through a simple case study to show how we can be applying the financial instrument to a typical case scenario. So assuming that you've got company XYZ, a small company that is leasing out vehicles to third parties, and it is established in Gozo. The company has decided to carry out 3 different types of investments. So you've got the replacement of existing M1 petrol and diesel vehicles with new electric or hybrid vehicles costing 35,000 euros each. An M1 vehicle is a normal passenger car. The second investment would be setting up the infrastructure at the premises of the company to be able to charge these vehicles. So here they would be investing into charging stations. And the third investment would be part of the refurbishment of the offices of the company through a heating and cooling system and a new ventilation system. So I'd just like to take you a little bit through the results and just to show how one can be applying for the different schemes. So basically, when it comes to the purchase of electric vehicles, given that there are schemes available through Transport Malta, the assumption here is that one will be using those schemes to purchase the vehicles. In that case, right, the grant is 11,000 euros for the purchase of 5 vehicles. And on the assumption that they will be scrapping the remaining 5 vehicles, that would give an additional 2,000 euros per vehicle. So in essence, that would mean that the company would be receiving a grant of 65,000 euros from the 175,000 euro investment. In that case, the remaining funding for the purchase of electric vehicles would need to be coming out of the own funds of the company. So in that case, the BOV, Business Energy Loan, cannot be used for the purchase of the remaining amount unless then one decides not to apply for the grant scheme and purely apply for the Business Energy Loan. On the assumption that the remaining investments will be supported through the Business Energy Loan, here one could be using the loan for the purchase of the charging stations, the heating and cooling system, and the ventilation system for the new offices. So in that case, what we can see is that from 212,500 investment cost, right, you've got, you can have a mix of funding here from both the grant scheme and the Business Energy Loan. So basically, sort of that sums up a little bit as a short example of a practical case where one can be looking at both the use of the Business Energy Loan in combination with available grants to support investment projects. So that's it from my end. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add. If not, we can move to the Q&A, Mark, from your end.
Just maybe a few points. I understand if I were to look at that case study from a business perspective, I'd see the own funds quite on the high side from an investment point of view. So what one can do from a structuring is that the own funds component could be financed through a normal market loan. So that could be considered. the business community may ask, but why can't I finance that through the BOV Business Energy Loan? This is something we have explored at length. And whilst there are some clauses in EU funds which allow the same cost item to be funded with certain terms and conditions, the issue is a state aid thing, which means that the aid being provided by Transport Malta already hits the maximum thresholds of aid. So that's why it is being proposed to segregate them in that way, and also that the own funds component then could be structured in such a way that it could use market rates and make it a little bit easier for the business to access finance. So just to wrap up, sort of way forward, within the business banking section, we currently have a team of people which is run by Kenneth, where we engage with customers on a daily basis to help them structure their business proposal and their business idea. And obviously, this is part of that exercise for us internally as a bank, so we're keen to continue doing it. However, in view of the technical nature of the energy efficiency component of the investment, then Kenneth will be liaising with the PwC on a case-by-case basis, depending upon the need. So point of contact would be Kenneth, and then we take it forward from there. So that's from Bank of Valletta, and I open the floor to question time.
Thank you very much. I don't know, Janet had some comment because I'm seeing a...
Yes, Janet, please.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to add, without going into very technical terms, into the own fund comment you had made just now, Mark. A solution could be that the state aid rules are changed in the schemes, and the foundation has gone into lengthy discussions with various authorities to go that way. And I think Malta Enterprise and the Ministry of Malta Enterprise have been very receptive to this. So changing state aid rules, and perhaps the loans, any loans from banks or the Malta Development Bank, can work in tandem with schemes. So there are solutions. Okay, I don't want to go too technical, but I want to say just my comment is there are various solutions that can apply in the future.
We look forward to them. I think the most simple one would be increasing the de minimis capping of 200,000 to 500,000. It's been there for over 10 years. So I think it's ripe for change. Market conditions are what they are. I hope Brussels can see reality on the ground.
So thank you very much for this very fruitful exchange. I open now the floor for discussion. We've run a bit out of time, but it's not, because it was very, very, so we have two questions. Do you think that, it's to Janet, addressed to Janet, there are two questions. Do you think that businesses are prepared to uptake the new technologies? That's the first question. And the second one is, what do you think are the main challenges facing Gozo to shift to green mobility?
Okay, whether they are ready. Well, I want to be optimistic. As soon as you start asking questions about whether you would like to stay in business in the future, I think it's the first sign that you are ready to go for innovation. So let's have this soul-searching exercise and stay positive. When we realize that what's going on outside Malta and Gozo, we are technology takers. So since we are technology takers, we are not in an influencing position of whether we go for hydrogen or not. I can tell you straight away, because of the war in Ukraine, the Commission is pushing fourfold the use of hydrogen in transport, because there is no way they would like to let go the objectives of the Fit for 55. So to answer your question, whether we are ready, I think the minute that you start asking yourself, are we going for this? Then you are ready, because you are ready to change. You are questioning your status quo. So that is point number one. Point number two, look around. Someone said, what is the next step to go green? look around. In the coming future, I think people are realizing that we have to be together in this. So if we have today a team like EIB, PwC, and BOV looking into this thing and picturing into one slide a possible way to go for a loan and what you can get out of it, I think they all know that we can all improve. There are various ways of improving. So I think the fact that you can look around and see how best to perform is the key. One way of caution, I think the best accelerator to go green for Gozo, one is to take the plunge. Perhaps I'm being too abrupt in this, but take the plunge in pilot projects. Go for small scale change. Do not go for like a big bang approach. So try to embrace change in small doses. And secondly, let's work together with the industry players, with the Gozo Business Chamber, and if possible, even GRAD, to, let's say, how can I explain? So that we can have one holistic approach, a concerted feedback, so that schemes are complementary to bank loans. The problem right now, one of the major issues in accelerating the innovation and the greening of transport is that there are hefty investments which have to take place. And people coming out of COVID problems, about a lot of disruptions in supply chain, a lot of unsure in pricing and deliveries, they need some comfort. And one of the comfort businesses are looking for is this complementarity between government schemes, whether they are Malta Enterprise Transport Malta or any other agency, and the banks, and the commercial banks, but perhaps even Malta Development Bank. So I don't know, Daniel, whether I have been exhaustive in my replies, but I think that is a good way forward.
Oh, it's quite exhaustive, Janet. As I said in the initial part of the discussion, there are a number of things which we need to plan for. There are a lot of discussions going on with respect to training and various entities, but as we said and as we discussed, I think Gozo can provide the ideal test bed for such technologies to be deployed and to make the shift then for the whole country. To say, we spoke here of test cases. I think in this case, Gozo can be the test case for the whole country in order to shift to green mobility.
Daniel, just a small point. There's a question on incentives and integrating themselves.
Yes. I was going to pass to it, Mark. I think that perhaps, how do you think these incentives would integrate themselves with other incentives to purchase it? I think that was perhaps answered in your...
I think it was answered, and just since it was sent at the end of the session, I don't know, but the way I think we need to address this on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
And assess each case in its own right. So I ask that small business who is asking for advice to contact us through Kenneth. We have an informal chat with you and then link you up with EIB PwC to explore different options.
Yes, I think that would be the best option in this case.
So I hope I answered that question.
A case. And then I think because of all, I'm a small business and would need the advisory support. Where do I need to go? I think despite there are all these entities involved, the first point of contact would be BOV, right, Mark?
Correct. Kenneth's team is there to help businesses kickstart the process, to understand better the business, and then we reach out to the different specialists that are needed.
Okay, so thanks very much. That would be all, I think, from our case. We've surpassed a bit our time, but it was a very interesting, not only presentations, technical information, but a very interesting exchange. So I would like to thank everyone, those who are following us both on our platform and also on our social media. I sincerely hope that this webinar has been fruitful to all those who have participated. The chamber is not only a chamber, we are also the host structure of Europe Direct. And since this objective of green mobility and carbon neutrality is very much at the heart of the European Commission's objectives, we are pushing very hard on these goals. And we believe very much that Gozo can achieve carbon neutrality before Malta and act as the test case from which all the country can get its example. So I would now like to thank once again Dr. Janet Axisa, Mark Shikluna Bartoli, Roman Dojczak, Daniela Burlo, Michelle Ganado, and Patrick Spiteri-Stains. And also Victoria Azzopardi for her continuous assistance in setting up these webinars. Thanks very much. A special note of thanks also goes to Richard Gregg, our technical coordinator during this webinar, and for the staff here at the chamber, Joanne Parnis and Gianluca Gatt for their assistance. I sincerely hope that this webinar will prove useful to initiate this important discussion on the subject here in Gozo. And finally, I would now like to invite you to continue following us both on our webpage and Facebook page. And thanks once again for joining us today.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.